Today we'll be going over our Week 2 fantasy start and sits for wide receivers. So we're going to start with the Thursday game. I know this video is being posted on Friday, but I'm recording it on Wednesday. And I posted in all of my links for yesterday videos my start and sit for this game. Here's a little bit of my rationale for it. AJ Green and Tyler Boyd, they had a tough matchup last week. I talked about it. AJ Green could have had a nice fantasy week, but that touchdown at the end got called back. He had pretty good target numbers. Tyler Boyd was targeted a lot less in that matchup. But to me, this is a very quality matchup. The Cleveland secondary is a little banged up. They let up a lot of fantasy points last week. So for those reasons, I'm starting both of those guys. And I'm starting Odell Beckham Jr. He had the targets last week. He had 10 targets. The connection is not there. I know there's off-field stuff going on, but you have to start him in my opinion, especially if Jarvis Landry does not play. He's currently a sit for me on a short week. They may not be playing him. Then I'm sitting John Ross because he's too big play dependent. Next game, the Giants in Chicago. You got to start Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller. Just like with Cleveland, the Giants let up a ton of fantasy points to receivers. In fact, the Giants were top 3 letting up wide receiver fantasy points last week. I know Mitch Trubisky is scary sometimes, but both of these guys should get volume. Both of these guys should get quality targets. And even though Allen Robinson had a little bit of issue through the week off the field with some media stuff, I think he still will be locked in, and both of these guys could put up good fantasy numbers. For me, I'm starting Slayton. He had a really good week 1. I believe he was top 12 for fantasy football PPR leagues. In fact, he came at number 5 with 28.2 fantasy points. He's going to be the touchdown guy to me. He's going to be the guy that can make a big play. And although this is a tougher defense, I'm going to be starting him. Sterling Shepard played well. He had a lot of good routes. But again, this is a tougher defense. And if I'm wanting to start a Giants receiver, it's Darius Slayton. And at the moment of this video, I don't know if Golden Tate's going to play. So for now, I'm going to say it's a sit. Atlanta and Dallas, pretty much just start everyone in this game. We know Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones put up monster numbers last week. Russell Gage as well could be a start. I'm a little more worried about Russell Gage because if there's any guy in this offense who's going to get left out of that fantasy mix for the receivers, it'll be Russell Gage. Yes, Ridley and Julio Jones will get their targets, but I'm a little less optimistic about Russell Gage keeping that top 10 potential every single week. Even for a top 20 potential, I think it's a lot to have 3 receivers top 20, and I don't think the Falcons are going to throw about 60 to 70 times every single game. And for the Dallas Cowboys, just start everyone. We know this Atlanta defense, their secondary stinks. Put them all in and feel confident that they could give you fantasy points. Lastly, Detroit at Green Bay. This is another game you kind of just want to start everyone. Last week, Devontae Adams, we know he went off. You have to put him in. He's a must start. And also, if you look at the defense let up for both of these teams for fantasy points, Detroit is coming in at 4th with 33.9 fantasy points given up to wide receivers last week. Green Bay is coming at 5, 33.2 fantasy points per wide receiver last week. So all of these guys could put up quality numbers. I'm a little less optimistic about MVS and Alan Lazard because I don't know which guy will be the guy for that number 2 position. But if there's a lot of passing in this game, you should feel confident starting a bunch of these guys in your flex, especially if it's a deeper league. Jacksonville and Tennessee, this game is going to be very interesting to me. I'm actually expecting a lot of rushing by Tennessee in this game. But to start, I'm going to talk about DJ Chark. I think the reason why that's rushing so important is because I think Jacksonville may not be on the field as much, and it's going to be a lot tougher going against this secondary. To me, DJ Chark is a start, though, because he will be leaned on by Gardner Minshew, in my opinion. Uh, Tennessee actually only let up 11 fantasy points to wide receivers last week against Denver, so I can't trust Laviska Shenault or Keenan Cole in this game. DJ Chark will be the guy, though, who will get most of the targets to me. And A.J. Brown is always going to be a start for me. He has that big play potential going up against a weaker defense. Corey Davis could be an interesting flex play. I was not expecting him to do much this year, but he kind of broke out last week against the Denver Broncos defense, and he had a very good showing, finishing in the wide receiver 2 category. Minnesota at Indianapolis. Adam Thielen, you have to start him. He's pretty much the only weapon I trust there, and that's why I'm sitting Justin Jefferson and BC Johnson. Adam Thielen had a quality performance last week. His stats were a little inflated by 2 big touchdowns, yet to me he needs to be the guy that you put in your lineups every single week because he's going to be the target machine if this team passes at all, really. I know they're a run-first team, but if they pass, he's going to be the guy. For Indianapolis, you got to start T.Y. Hilton, and I'm also starting Paris Campbell this week. Last week we saw that the Minnesota Vikings secondary is not good at all. They got toasted by Devontae Adams, and they give up a lot of big plays to MVS and Allen Lazard. I would feel confident starting T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell. As for Michael Pittman, I'm sitting him for now because I don't have that security in his floor on any given week yet. Buffalo and Miami. Start John Brown and Stephon Diggs. They got a ton of targets this week. They roasted the Jets. I know this is a little bit more of a tougher matchup with the secondary, but I feel that the targets are going to be there, the volume's going to be there, and in turn that should put out decent quality fantasy numbers every single week. As for Devontae Parker and Preston Williams, I will be sitting them both. I did not like what I saw this week for Miami. Yes, it was a New England secondary that's very tough, but this is a Buffalo Bills secondary that's very tough, and I do not trust the matchup for either of these guys. Lastly, San Francisco and the Jets. Again, this is another matchup where I really am just waiting for the injury reports. Not much to say at this point. Kendrick Bourne could be a start. We know the Jets defense is not that good in the back end. We saw that Buffalo kind of toasted them a lot of times, but I don't know if I trust Bourne, and I don't know if I trust his San Francisco passing attack yet after what I saw last week to really feel confident. For now, he's a flex play at most, but we'll see what the injury status is on Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. Also, Jamison Crowder is going to be a must-start almost every single week. This is a tougher matchup, so maybe you're a little iffy, but the volume is going to be there as they don't have anyone, and he could easily give you 9 to 10 catches every single week. LA Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll start with the Eagles here. I'm sitting all the receivers. I can't trust them after what I saw last week. For one, the offensive line looked brutal, and if you have a bad offensive line that can't block, it's going to cause disruptions in the passing game. Against this Rams defensive front, I do not trust them this week, so I am not starting any of them. As for the Rams, I'm getting a little worried too about Cooper Kupp. He didn't see many targets last week, only 5. Robert Woods had 8, which is pretty good. I mean, it's quality target share there. And I think a lot of it has to do with their personnel groupings. We saw at the end of last season, Kupp kind of got faded out of the offense because they ran a lot 12 personnel instead of that 11 personnel. And as of now, I'm starting him. But in the future, if we start to see his numbers really decrease, he could be a sit. I'm also sitting Van Jefferson. Unless there's an injury to one of these guys, there's no reason to start him. Denver at Pittsburgh. I will be starting Juju and Deontay Johnson. Both guys got plenty of volume last week. I think going against this Denver defense, we saw Corey Davis kind of have a big game last week. I think that both Juju and Deontay Johnson can get the quality volume that they need in order to be fantasy relevant this week. And I really just trust the Steelers' passing attack. James Washington is a sit, though, for me because he's kind of too dependent on the big play. As for Denver, at the time of this video, I don't know if Courtland Sutton is playing. To me, it's very risky going against this top-notch Steelers defense. If Courtland Sutton plays, I think he would be a start because we saw like last week, Darius Slayton had a couple of big touchdowns, and you can move the ball on this team through the air at times. But if he doesn't play, I'm not putting my trust in Jerry Jeudy or Tim Patrick as my number 1 and number 2 receivers for that offense against this top-notch defense. Carolina and Tampa Bay, I'm starting DJ Moore. He got a lot of volume last week. Yes, he wasn't as productive as we would like, but I like seeing that volume, and to me that is always good when you're starting a fantasy wide receiver. Robbie Anderson, he had a big play last week. It really set him off the top for fantasy football, but I don't really trust this matchup. Tampa Bay secondary, they looked very good against the Saints last week. So to me, I'm going to sit him and Curtis Samuel as I don't trust them going against this Tampa Bay defense. As for Tampa Bay, we found out Chris Godwin, he has that concussion protocol. I don't know if he'll be playing. If he does play, he's a start. If not, this is the way I'm looking at it. Mike Evans, he'll get a couple of big plays going against this Carolina defense. I think that he could have a really good game. And Scotty Miller will be the volume guy. We saw it this week. He got some quality looks, some quality targets. So especially if Chris Godwin is not playing, trust that both of these guys could be fantasy relevant. Washington and Arizona, you got to start Terry McLaurin. Yes, he didn't have the best week 1, but he's going to be the main guy. And I think that they got to pass a little bit more going against this tougher Arizona defense. And DeAndre Hopkins, we saw the volume last week. He's going to be the number 1 guy. He had 14 catches, I believe, which is just incredible. As for Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, I do not trust the volume yet. I don't know which guy is going to be the number 2 guy, if there's going to be a number 2 guy. So for now, just sit both of them on your bench. Looking at Kansas City and the Chargers, you got to start Tyreek Hill. Yes, he had a slow week 1, but he has that touchdown and big play ability. And to me, any given week he could go off and win you your fantasy week. You drafted him for those reasons, so start him in your lineups. As for Sammy Watkins, I was quite impressed with what Watkins did in week 1. Not only from a fantasy football perspective, but from a target share perspective. He had 9 targets, which was a lot more than I anticipated. To me, if he is that number 2 guy, I think he could be a top 20 wide receiver this year. He finished top 10 last week. So to me, as a flex play, definitely start him. Mecole Hardman, though, and Demarcus Robinson, both of those guys could also play that role. So it's very cautious of me to say this. Start Sammy Watkins, but he could bust. He could have that opportunity to bust. I am confident in him this week, but there's always that side of things where they could switch up the targets at any given time. As for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, start them both. They both saw 9 targets last week. Tyrod Taylor was pushing the ball downfield. That's what you like to see. I was not expecting the Chargers to do that as much, but for now, we've seen that they want to push the ball downfield. Going against Kansas City, the secondary, perhaps they could push it a little bit more and get those quality looks. And perhaps both of these guys could be fantasy relevant this week. So start them with confidence. As for Baltimore and Houston, I'm starting Marquise Brown. Yes, he had a good performance this week. I was hoping that he would get a little bit more in terms of receptions and touchdowns, but he showed big play ability, so you got to start him in your fantasy lineups. Will Fuller, he was the guy last week. I expect him to be the guy this week. It's a very tough matchup again, and I don't really feel confident in this Texans offense yet. But if there's one guy on the outside I'm willing to throw in my flex, it's Will Fuller. Uh, he's going to get the volume to me, and I would feel confident in that type of volume from a receiver who has that big of upside as him. As for the rest of the guys, I'm going to sit them. I don't trust this matchup. And Willie Snead to me is also a sit. New England and Seattle. So this game is going to be very defensive oriented to me. I don't really trust both of these passing attacks. Yes, Seattle went off last week in terms of passing numbers, but they were versing an Atlanta secondary that's not good. I am very concerned for DK Metcalf going against Gilmore. I think Gilmore matches up very well with his physicality, and I could see Metcalf busting. For those reasons, I'm going to sit him. I know that may be a little discouraging to see for you Metcalf owners, but I just don't trust this matchup. I feel like Seattle's going to run a lot more this week because that's where the Patriots' weakness is up front. Tyler Lockett, though, will be a start because I just trust that chemistry a little bit more with Russell Wilson. I trust his volume a little bit more every single week, and he's not so dependent on those big plays like DK Metcalf. For New England, start Julian Edelman, mostly because of the volume. Yes, they didn't pass much last week, but he still got some quality looks. And for those reasons, I can't start N'Keal Harry because they didn't pass much, and I don't know what to expect from this offense. Monday night, I'm going to be starting Emmanuel Sanders. Michael Thomas out for a few weeks. He should fill in a quality role as a wide receiver 2 or flex for your rosters. Then I'm also going to start Traquan Smith. 2 years ago, he put up 3 performances of top 10 or better. I think that he could be a breakout candidate this week. So start him in your deeper leagues and your flex in hopes that he pops. For Las Vegas, I don't trust any of these guys yet to be a good quality receiver. This is a very good New Orleans defense as we saw last week, so I will be sitting all of them. Although Henry Ruggs, to me, could be the one guy that is flex-worthy as he has that big play capability. Thank you guys for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them below.